If you're anything like me, you probably first heard of Jordan Peele from the Comedy Central show Key and Peele. A lot of these sketches were pretty memorable, and I still even hear people quoting them over 10 years later.
You done messed up, Aaron!
So when we went from that to 2017's Get Out, I'm sure many people were surprised to say the least. We saw very high praise, and I personally love that movie, but that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the next movie in his horror filmography, Us. This movie has some fantastic scenes, really good horror, great acting, and the comedic relief he is known for. But while I really enjoy this movie, I definitely have a few criticisms, but despite that, it does do a really good job at reeling you in. On top of that, the comedic nature really keeps the flow going between the horror and slight exposition we get, but some of the stuff in the movie really just doesn't make a lot of sense. If you haven't seen it, check it out before this video, as I'm going to get into spoilers now. Before I start talking about the meat and potatoes, I just want to do a quick rundown of the movie. Because despite the nearly 2-hour runtime, the story is pretty easy to wrap up. As a child, Adelaide wanders away from her parents and into a house of mirrors. After the power goes out, she sees a little girl who is identical to her. We don't see what happens, we only know that after this, she has gone nonverbal. A therapist suggests to her family that she expresses her emotions through art, like drawing or dance. We skip ahead to when Adelaide is an adult. She has 2 kids, Jason and Zora, with her husband Gabe. They're on a vacation at their beach house, which so happens to be close to where the events of her childhood took place. She starts noticing some coincidences, like the reoccurring number of 1111. As when she wandered off when she was younger, she saw a man holding a sign about Jeremiah 11:11. She really wants to leave because of the coincidences, but as she is telling Gabe about this, a family shows up to their home. The family is almost identical to Adelaide's, except they're a little less clean cut, a lot more creepy, and none of them can talk except for Adelaide's doppelganger, whose voice is extremely raspy. This is a high-tension, home invasion-esque scene where all of the doppelgangers start going after the family members individually. And while her family is in danger, Adelaide is handcuffed by her clone and remains so throughout the movie. The other family members either subdue or get away from their doppelgangers, and when the evil Adelaide goes to check on evil Jason, the whole family is able to escape to their boat. They arrive at their neighbor's house, who they usually spend time with on their summer trips, and they find they have also been killed by their parallel selves. Adelaide's family eventually subdues them all and tries calling 911, but the call volume is too high, suggesting this is happening everywhere. They decide to flee via their neighbor's car, but are stopped by their own car burning in the middle of the road. This distraction eventually leads to Jason getting abducted by evil Adelaide and taken to the House of Mirrors from the beginning of the movie. Gabe is too injured to pursue, and Adelaide follows after them, where she goes into the tunnel that is below the attraction. This seems to be a very large set of tunnels under the city that was actually alluded to at the start of the movie. Here, Adelaide has a confrontation with her alternate self, subdues her, and her and Jason return with her family. This description doesn't do the movie justice, obviously, but I'll be going into some details about scenes to paint a better picture, but also to show what the movie does well and what it doesn't. From the start, Adelaide seems very normal, but has a very high aversion to being near the trauma of her childhood. This makes sense, but we aren't told until the very end of the movie what this trauma is. So we know there is some tension, and the framing of shots, acting, and score exemplify this in a great way. Even when nothing is happening, and it's a nice sunny day, we know something is wrong. Through some genuinely funny dialogue, we see that she is distracted the entire time. At the end of the movie, we find out that it's because she was one of the clones from underground. I'm going to refer to them as tethered now because that's the description we are given. The tethered lived underground and were a government experiment with intentions of controlling the people on the surface. When this failed, they abandoned the tethered, being left to mimic the people on the surface with only rabbits to eat. This is why the tethered copy mannerisms of the people on the surface, but can't talk. They don't hear them on the surface, but they are mimicked because they share the same soul. Tethered Adelaide as a child, by sheer chance, ran into the surface Adelaide, crushed her vocal cords, and swapped places with her to escape the prison of the underground. This is why she wouldn't talk at first after the incident, because she had no idea how. It also explains why the Adelaide that was leading the tethered could talk, because she already knew how. This twist is genuinely good, and you can figure it out if you really pay attention. I'm saying this with retrospect, but when Adelaide is killing the other tethered, she grunts animalistically like the tethered would, and Jason witnesses this, so he is the only one in the family who puts this together. There is no verbal confirmation of this, just through Jason's actions. We can see he is afraid of Adelaide, and the look he gives her at the end of the movie. I really think this twist elevates the movie a great deal, and I genuinely loved it. On top of this, the tethered scenes are incredibly unnerving, because as I said, they mimic mannerisms while being extremely malicious. They even have kids with their tethered selves, which has some super dark implications, as the Adelaide leading the tethered mentioned she had to have kids with tethered Gabe whether she loved him or not. It gives them a very uncanny feeling and some fantastic visuals. They even use the tethered to create a couple really funny scenes as well. Which really shows how great of a director and writer Jordan Peele is. Even at some truly cruel parts of the movie, he can still make you laugh. And he does this in a lot of his horror movies. It's something that makes the pacing feel really good and gives you a short break from tension. However, despite how much I enjoy the movie, there are some things that I don't like or that just don't make sense, which didn't take me out of it, but I don't enjoy having to ask why in the middle of a movie either. My issue isn't the symbolism, but that the movie kind of asks you to take it literally, which is where a lot of my issues stem from. I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of what Jeremiah 11:11 is saying, its implications being that the ones on the surface have to face judgment for the cruelty the tethered experience, but the surface dwellers of the tethered are not responsible for their treatment. They don't even know the tethered exist. And while horror is typically unfair, the idea of those on the surface facing judgment for something they didn't cause is just a little weird to me. And I get the thematical idea behind it, it just feels off in a literal sense. On top of this, a lot of the tethered logic just doesn't really make sense. Like, where do their clothes come from? We see that the tethered are wearing red on the surface, but in flashback scenes, we see them wearing the same clothes on the surface. This is a pretty whatever detail, and you can call it nitpicky, but a lot of other stuff doesn't make sense either. The tethered don't have any food other than raw rabbits. They eat at the same time as the surface people, sure, but your stature would be significantly different if you were only eating raw rabbits instead of like McDonald's every day. I don't expect the actors to significantly lose or gain weight because of this, of course, but it's just another detail I couldn't help but think about. On top of this, some of the tethered just seem to shrug off assaults while others go down with relative ease. A good example is Gabe hits his tethered self with a bat, it falls into the water, is dragged by its foot through the lake, but is still able to nearly subdue Gabe a minute later. But in contrast, Zora, who is not a 6 foot over 200-pound man, subdues two tethered with relative ease just using a golf club. Gabe also jams a fire poker into a tethered's face and is seemingly unaffected. Maybe it's a skill issue, but it's just pretty inconsistent throughout the movie. Also, you've probably heard this before about zombie movies, but I don't think something like this has a chance of happening in America. In a realistic setting, the people on the surface would respond pretty rapid and lethally, especially because two sets of tethered families are dealt with without guns, and multiple are taken out by literal children. And I understand if you think I'm looking into things too much, or if some things are inconsistent because it's supposed to be a metaphor, but the way the movie portrays a lot of things is in a literal sense, not a metaphorical. In conclusion, I don't think any of my complaints should be a deterrent. The movie is genuinely entertaining to watch, and if this video spoiled the ending for you, that is a shame, because the twist really brings it together. The ending confrontation between the two Adelaides is a beautifully shot and put together sequence. It uses a more creepier tone of the song I Got 5 on it throughout it, and that adds a lot to the scene. It turns something familiar into something scary, and it's a great touch. In general, the score that accompanies the movie is great. This movie came out 7 years ago, but even in today's horror landscape, I think it would have performed well if it didn't come out until this year. In my opinion, this is one of the best horror movies in the past decade, and it leaves you wondering who actually is the evil Adelaide. We obviously know which one is which, but morally, who is the villain between the two? But what do you think? Were you one of the people that never understood the hype, or is it among the goats of the decade? If you think I missed something that explains my complaints, definitely let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe for more like it. I've been Kali, and I'll see you in the next one.